Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Fool podcast. This week, we're going to be reviewing and discussing the 2002 film called The Secretary, directed by Steven Shainberg. It stars actually a couple folks that I think people would recognize, Mary Gyllenhaal and James Spader. They're actually probably more well known for the stuff they did after, but this was a interesting early 2000s film where they both starred in basically it's called an erotic drama, which is a very different, I would say, genre than we've done on this podcast. And it piqued my interest because I was just browsing, indie films, and what actually sucked me in was actually the leads. So I was like, oh, this will be interesting. And then this ended up becoming a little bit more than I expected. But to set it up before I get you to share your initial thoughts, just because the plot's pretty straightforward in the sense of the big picture. So the typical, beginning, middle, and end. You have the main, you have the main characters who are as Lee Holloway, and then Edward Gray, I believe his name is. Mm-hmm. Edward Gray. I'm trying because it's been a while since I watched the movie. I'm pretty sure he's a lawyer.
Yeah. They always call each other kind of by the last names. By the way, he always said like Lee, and she says like Gray, things like that. So to help simplify, you could just refer to them as that.
Okay. He's a lawyer, and he needs a new a secretary assistant, and she has just got out of a mental institute, because they hint that she has some mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And it's about how their dynamic, they become basically involved as a couple. We'll use the word air quotes here. I'll use air quotes here, but how that manifests and how that, how it manifests and how it develops is to say it's very unique. Basically, it's power dynamic BDSM type of relationship. And I'm curious because I know I warned you this is a different type of movie, so I'm curious to your initial thoughts, what you thought of the film at a high level, structurally, the actors and stuff, and then we can get to some of the details, and then we'll take it from there.
Even though I have not seen this movie, at first when I was watching it, I was like, this is kind of like a low budget Grays, or 50 Shades of Grey. But that was like my initial thoughts in the first 10 minutes, like that, because I could kind of see where it was progressing. But it was kind of interesting. We'll speak more to it. It brought up some kind of interesting themes, I would say, in terms of one thing that kind of struck me that you find out later is, especially with their kind of relationship, he actually helps her overcome some of her kind of issues, some of her tics. One of the things that is hinted at is that because of some of her mental issues that she's dealing with, that being Lee, that she would cut herself and do some other things to kind of relieve the pain or some of the struggles in her life. And basically he was able to snap her out of it, but with his sort of domineering position. And that kind of did help. So one of the things I did find interesting was, I think that they were trying to hint at is that sometimes pain can help you overcome some of your trauma, is kind of what it seemed, which was kind of interesting. And I don't know if we've necessarily reviewed a film that's touched on that before or kind of made you think about that. I don't know. That was kind of my big takeaway. If you want to know the rest of it, I thought the pacing was pretty slow. It was not one of my favorite films. I thought the casting did a good job, or the acting did a good job, but
yeah, I thought it was slow, but it was slow, but I felt like it kind of fit this film just because it was really abnormal as it is, So I had forgotten that initially. I remember how many mistakes. So he hires her, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's just looking for somebody to do basic stuff, and then she's really bad at it, right? I remember she makes a lot of mistakes.
Clearly with 2 E's.
Yeah, she has a lot of
typos.
Typos. I think she just makes a lot of just typical basic errors. Obviously, that improves over time, but I also found it interesting that her dynamic with her family is it's not explored too deeply. It's given to you.
You really don't Obviously she had some like father issues. Like that's pretty.
Yeah, she had breadcrumbs. A little side tangent is like one thing this film does. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I think it speaks to the world of men. Is that she actually, Lee with all her issues, because she's pretty good looking. Obviously, she's an actress, so she's not going to be unattractive. But I think even if it was like a normal person in the street, obviously she has like obviously she's interested in the Gray, but there's that other character that's like really wants to get with her. I forgot his name.
Yeah, Peter, I believe.
Peter. And my side tangent is that like watching this film reminded me how like, how we talked about, I think off camera, how like sometimes like depending on the perspective of if it's the guy or girl or whatever, like sometimes like standards could be kind of like what a guy prioritizes might not be as important as what a girl prioritizes, etc. And it's like, it's so obvious that like this guy is like, he's just attracted to her, but like he just blushes over everything else that are pretty red flaggy. And like,
of course.
And I found that funny, but not like, I don't think it was their intent, but I just found that funny because I see this all the time with dudes that just like, oh, she's hot.
But they kind of like trauma bonded a bit. And I think that was their initial dynamic.
That's true.
They both said that they had nervous breakdowns, if you remember.
Yeah, because I think
also that was weird. That whole scene at the washer dryer, like it was like they were eating dinner at a dry cleaner.
Yeah,
or like a laundromat.
He was definitely not all right in the screws weren't all in the head either.
No,
so. Actually, a lot of the characters get most of the screen time. That's one of my takeaways is like how abnormal dynamics can be. And even though these are fictional characters, I think what intrigued me was like, I guess like relationships and dynamics can come in all shapes or sizes. Like for instance, this story just came to me while we're talking about this pod is that I was recently in the Czech Republic and I wanted to, eat at a Czech restaurant. And I sat down, it was good dark beer, all the good Czech food, and I don't know if they're a couple or friends. They sat at like a table, like, I don't know, a few tables over. They obviously were tourists. I think they were there for something else. There must have been some kind of convention or something. But they were wearing like the typical anime gear and t-shirt. And like, they definitely look of that archetype. But they were confused because in Czech culture, if it's a true Czech restaurant, you have to pick a spot and sit down and just claim it. And then they'll basically create a tab for you with a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So they were standing around, and then I don't think they were English speakers because I couldn't understand what they were saying. The couple or they were friends. I couldn't tell. It was a weird dynamic, but they sat down. They were instructed to sit down, and then they were looking at the menu, petrified. Sometimes you just read body cues, and I think they didn't realize what they got themselves into because they were just like they look like they don't know what the order. And the host with his broken English, had to like help them decide. And what's interesting is that I know that like everybody rips on American tourist English, but often the reality is that the common language for like another foreign tourist and the locals is English, even if it's like really bad. Seeing this dynamic was like, oh, interesting. But anyways, I bring it back to the film because this couple, I don't know if it was a couple or a friendship, but they was definitely odd. Like even how they're because sometimes you can tell like, okay, they're friends. There's just the dynamic, but like sometimes he would put his arm on her hand. Other times it was like more, but it was like weird. Like,
this was at
the restaurant. Yeah.
He was trying to pursue something. That's
maybe, yeah. But like it was just so socially awkward. And so I brings it back to this film where like sometimes we have perceptions of what like a relationship looks like and should feel like. But this film made me think about how sometimes dynamics could just be, because humans are very complicated mammals, can be like there can be variations, right? So like, one thing that I was curious of seeing in this film as it progressed was like, was this really gonna like how was this really gonna work? Because there's a lot of issues here, right? Like employee relationship, right? Employee boss,
and then manipulation, gaslighting,
control, like a lot of the things that like
he did the whole like, so obviously it's extreme, but the push pull.
Yeah,
I was like, okay.
and then like I mean, we're jumping around, but like mainly what I want to get to is like there is this powerful sequence where like the ultimate test for her is like not to move from the. Okay, so to set it up, Gray starts like commanding her, right? Like you need to do this way, even though it's absurd, right? Like the when she's on the desk and she's like, you know,
Yeah.
getting paddled, um, and other things, and then the ultimate test because she bails on this wedding with Peter is like sit at the desk and don't move for like 48 hours. I won't
It
even
was like
check on you.
72, I think. It was like 3 days.
Yeah, and I won't check on you, and like he's there to see how I guess like how willing, how devoted
Yeah.
she is. And like her friends and family are begging her to like, what is wrong with you? And she's just there. She's even like peeing herself there.
Yeah.
It's like it was super dramatic, right? And from one perspective, so this is a long tirade because I want to get I have a question at the end of this. Is that from one perspective you could view it as insane, but then I took like a different look at it and I was like, yeah, okay, this is dramatic and it's BDSM, but like this is the kind of rationalization people do for love, quote unquote, in other ways, right? Like, oh, he treated me like crap. He cheated on me. But there's the rationalization, right? Like people are like, you see this on social media all the time where like the girl's like, I should have known. I should have left the guy when like he threw my phone out the window because he was tired of the ringtone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's just how he is. I'm like, what? And we're like, there's all these stories you can find online about these kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like so, like you could criticize this girl, like because I bet you the sentiment at the time was like she's crazy. This film was too, on the nose, all that stuff. But I see how our culture's progressed in 20 years since this movie, and I'm like, but people do this rationalization all the time with different things, and
people I think are at different levels of maturity.
Yeah,
you're not the same as you were when you were 20, Chris.
Right? I try to be though.
No, you know what I'm saying too. Sometimes you're just like young, especially in relationships. A lot of times it's like it's hard, right? Because you're kind of like expected to know a lot or try to figure things out, and like you kind of learn by doing. Like no one figures it out, and obviously, like you make mistakes. What's the old BoJack quote that we've talked about quite a bit with like Wanda? Once they break up, his kind of like our girlfriend. She says, when you look at everything through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. I think that's just generally how it is. You're kind of fogged by your vision when you're in the moment there.
That's why I'm big on like retrospectives and like every 30-day review cycles. So
I agree with you. I just get annoyed when people are like, "Oh, I'm working on my stuff," or I'm trying to figure things out. And it's like, well, what are you doing to do that? Like I hear like a lot of vagaries and not a lot of like action. A lot of times with people.
Yeah, because my philosophy, people don't fundamentally change. Anyways, what I want to
people like cliches. I'm speaking to someone who does.
Oh yeah, I love cliches, dude. I love cliches, but I actually live by my cliches. That's the best part. Anyways, what I wanted to ask was like, I guess did this film in any ways like change your perspective of like maybe just a simple question is BDSM to how maybe healthy relationships ought to operate? Because one question I left was like, is this relationship healthy or not? I thought that was one of the fundamental questions the film was trying to pose to us. So I'm curious. Once I think easier because I'm just curious. The second one is like I think a message of the film is trying to ask you, the audience. I always appreciate that from a movie that's trying to get me to think. So I'm curious what you thought on those two fronts.
So your question is, was that a healthy relationship?
That's the second. That's the more important one. But I'm just curious in general. Did this change your views on BDSM and that kind of dynamic? Or are you still like,
Not really. Well, my big issue with this, a lot of it was that from the get-go and how it started, it was purely on manipulation. Mm-hmm. And that's where I found a big, like the foundation of their dynamic was all manipulation. He saw that she was kind of nervous, shy, young. And he's like, oh, this is someone I can mold and take advantage of. Was kind of, and I think that's where I had the big issues. Like regardless of what happened at the end or if she was cool with it, the fact that that's how it started, I think always like clouded my view of things, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, she was having a good time with Peter, right? And they were like she had mental issues. She was at a and he knew that because she could see that, on her leg that she had cut herself. right? So obviously she was a little insecure and just not in the best state of mind. And he's like, I can help her and manipulate her in that way. Even like I think on top of that, he even freaked out when he saw her and Peter at the laundromat having their little date night, right? That sent him into like a little fury, and so that really irritated him. And that was the other thing that I got annoyed with was he did all the manipulation tactics. He like lured her in, got her used to one thing, and then like pulled back and acted like nothing happened. And it's like that was like the most like gaslighting manipulation thing that ever like that was like real life ghosting, not like over the phone. So I think in many ways there was a lot of problems with their dynamic. In terms of like if you're talking about BDSM as a whole, like personally, I don't care. Like if that dynamic works for some people, it's fine. It's none of my business really.
That's fair.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, I had viewed it as like too kinky and abnormal, but now I see that like through some
Yeah, but I mean,
but
here's
now
the thing,
my
like
my
things shift for certain people.
yeah, so now what it shift for me is that like I see why like if you feel like you need to get that dynamic because you don't get it in your normal, life, of like how am I trying to articulate this? Basically, that I think it changed my view a little bit in the sense that like because obviously maybe 50 Shades of Grey kind of clouded my judgment, but now I see that like it could just be a way of like expressing yourself with your significant other if it's done in a way that you both agree on and respect. So that's the
Yeah, I mean, I think some people are even comfortable with the ways traditional relationships that are kind of normal work, where they think that it should be more equal or things like you hear that all the time. It's like, well, there's no clear answer.
exactly. And then around the relationship, I think, yeah, I see your point about the manipulation.
Dude, anyway, go, no, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I see your point. Only thing I will say is that like I think I'm not even gonna say I disagree because again they leave it open ended whether that it's really gonna work or not. But I find it interesting that like they've kind of like withheld like what could be like the deeper triggers. Like they left it to maybe your imagination with the parents and stuff. And you know, I hate to go all Greek philosophy here, but like there's that, or no, not Greek, Freudian analysis where it's like you end up there are attributes of your partner eventually when one settles on a partner that they will have the attributes of one of your parents. If you're a dude, it's attributes of your mother. And so because I never got to see the character, her father's character, I just wonder if it was like you said, it was just something to fill that missing piece, and she was just looking for that mixed with like weird sexual tension. But as I said earlier, right, people are complicated. I think like in the end, my take based on the movie's tone and everything is that yes, it's weird. Yes, it's probably red flags. Yes, it wouldn't work for 99% of the people, but for these specific fictional characters, it's gonna work.
Yeah,
That's the message I got from the film. So.
yeah, but more my point was like a lot of how they got there. It's like, do the ends justify the means? Right. That's something you talk about in ethics a lot, and I'm not so
Yeah.
sure.
All I know is that history has proven that at the ends always justify the means. But okay, dude.
Does
Yeah.
does it always?
The greatest lie ever told. American democracy. I'll just I won't go on a tirade.
Yeah, it's like okay.
Yeah, I'll have to think about specific examples in a set later, but I could find.
I mean, there's some I can prove to you where I think you would agree. It's like, well, we might have had some good outcomes in the long run, but it was done through some terrible ways. There's a lot of examples you can give.
Well, there is a lot of examples of that.
Yeah. Anyway,
I guess besides that, I guess we could talk about some critiques of the film. I think that makes sense because, like, I think one issue I'll start off with, like, one issue I had with the movie was kind of like, I think, before I get into that, there was that one weird scene that was kind of like bizarre to me. I think it's like
the worm.
No, Gray's ex shows up.
Oh yeah,
and I was just like, yeah, and then like he like hides, right?
Yeah, in the closet.
Yeah, I mean, what I started realizing about this Gray guy is that like this guy's a lawyer or whatever, blah blah blah, but like he's got issues too.
He's got a lot of issues. Are you
Yeah.
kidding? I
And
would not
like
call him well adjusted.
yeah, I don't. And yeah, so when two people who are not well adjusted meet, happiness ensues. That's the theme I got out of it. Um,
Hmm.
the
I know a lot of examples that would counter that conclusion.
I'm just saying this movie, you know, is trying to portray a positive
The movie's
message.
saying a lot of things and a lot of nothing at the same time. But
Yeah, I think this movie. See, my sense
like this is not the person. If you're talking about like relationship dynamics, this is not what I would prescribe for 100, like 99.99% of people.
What do you mean? I can't wait to show this at a high school class, dude. Anyways,
You're gonna get banned, dude.
well, I could be banned for a lot of things, but what I will say is that you touched upon something that I think is an issue with the film is that I don't mind ambiguity. I think it's important in movies. I think it's why we have analysis of movies and writing. But I do think that this film at times was a bit too liberal with stuff. So, like, again, fine. You don't want to do some backstory on the parents? Fine. I understand that creative choice. I think, like, you know, not exploring a little bit, because you can watch this movie in a certain interpretation, basically, right? You could be like, okay, this Lee has all these issues, and this guy who is, you know, a little more put together. I say a little bit lightly. You know, he has some quirks, but like he helps her along, and this blossoming love ensues. But I actually feel like they unexplored how messed up Gray is. And I think the director, so my critique of this director actually is that I think he wanted to be different. And sometimes, you know, that's a good intention. But I think this film comes across as like, oh, I want to be different. I want to be raunchy. I don't want to be like everybody else. So I'm gonna like put stuff up. It's like an abstract painting. Like I'm gonna just put stuff on the wall, and then some things are gonna stick and really resonate, and other things are gonna be like, okay,
yeah.
like,
what I say, it lacked a lot of cohesiveness to me.
So yeah, the abstract painting analogy works for you too. Okay.
Yeah, because I agree. Because there was a point I'm like, what does this add to this? Or like you were saying with the ex-wife, I was like, okay, like you introduced, and then that was it. You don't really see. You even talk about the paralegal, like some of the interactions were just bizarre and weird. Like, especially when they like have that international interaction where she's like, "Oh, you're the new secretary," and then like Lee is, "Oh, what exactly is a paralegal?" And then she just walks out. I was like, "What did that have to do with anything?"
Yeah, that's why like I'm sticking with my analogy that this film felt like I have a wall of canvas and I'm just gonna stick stuff, and stuff is gonna look. It's going to actually get you to think, and other stuff is going to be like, okay, dude, like what's going on?
Supposed to do with this?
Yeah, like that was one of my issues with the film is that like, you know, what I mean, I enjoy slow films, so like I'm not as going to be hard on that.
I will say what cracked me up was she's like, "Tell me what I should eat," and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was like, "This is the most extreme example of like, I don't know where I want to eat for dinner."
That is the most extreme. Yes, that's
you only have four peas.
Yeah, that's the most extreme
I will say
example.
that scene made me crack up. She's like, "What can I eat? 1 scoop of mashed potatoes and 4 peas."
Yeah, that was a rough one. But that was funny. Yeah, that was what can I eat?
I was like, this is absurd, but I think that's what they were trying to go for.
I guess we should touch upon it because we usually do. You know, I've seen Spade. I think where I know Spade the most is actually Boston Legal. I know
he was in a bunch of films in the 90s too.
Yeah, he's in a bunch of films in the 90s. He's actually in a film that I eventually want to get to, Wall Street. He's a minor character there. But when I grew up, it was Boston Legal, and then I didn't watch it as much as my other friend did, but it was the Blacklist. I know he was in that too.
I never watched it.
And yeah, I've only seen like one season. It's not worth your time. Anyways, and then Maggie Gyllenhaal. I actually think my first exposure to her was actually The Dark Knight.
Not The Dark Knight. I've seen her in some other films too.
I mean, I'm saying with my first exposure because these are like well-known actors now who are like have had good careers. And I've seen her in other things now, but like I think that's my first memory because I don't remember anything before that.
I've seen her brother in a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, but Jake's a
Like, did you ever
legend.
see like he was in Donnie Darko? That was an interesting film. We might review that at some point.
I haven't seen that one yet, but
Okay. Oh, man. Okay. Well, yeah, I might have to throw that one in the list.
yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to discuss of this film. I'm pretty good on my end.
I'm pretty wrapped up with this. Like it's
All
pretty
right.
straight storyline.
Yeah, this one's straightforward. I mean, this is just a love story. I'm gonna do air quotes. A love story, but a love story with a different twist on it. So, which actually, considering all the rom-coms we have nowadays, I mean, I guess that must be appreciated at least to the minimum. But because maybe I'll do the opposite. I'll do the traditional eventually. I'm not ready for one again, but I'll do the traditional rom-com. I'll probably one of a few of those picks, and then you're like, oh, okay, it is a genre.
We did 50. Oh, I'm sorry, 500 Days of Summer.
Yeah, but that's still a different take, a little bit better take. I meant like a pure like.
We did Fault in Our Stars. I know how much you love that film.
that was still a twist. I meant a pure. These are like upper middle class people that can fly business and they love it. Yeah.
You want 50 First Dates.
No, anyone but you. Let's go, Sydney Sweeney. That's coming down the pipe eventually, dude.
I haven't seen that.
I saw it on the plane. It is so like, it's funny because it's stupid, but it's like the typical like. This is the movie that like I think people watch, and they kind of wish their romantic lives were like that. That's my take on that film. But I will get to that one day. The one that I do want to do that's actually was revolutionary for its time, and I think defined like rom-coms for like the 90 for the 90s and early 2000s was I think it's the 1989 film When Harry Met Sally. I saw that once like a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think it still holds up because I think it's
Where Harry Met Sally. Yeah.
It's still it's a famous one. I think it kind of changed the genre moving forward.
Sure.
And that's a hard category to do that because, like I said, it's been done and done again. You know, they're into each other and they're not into each other. I mean, honestly, like the plot's pretty straightforward, but some of the jokes are funny. Anyways, I'll let you go first, and then I'll wrap up, and then we'll hit it.
Yeah, so I got to give it credit because I'm sure it was pretty ambitious to do a film like this at the time, like 20 years ago. Obviously, like our perception has been clouded because, like, I feel like this is a little bit more normalized, or they've done like 50 Shades of Grey, so it's not like kind of like out of the ordinary to have a film that's focused on this kind of subject matter, if that makes sense. To be honest, though, I thought the pacing was just a little too slow. I thought it was a little choppy and incohesive. Had a lot of times, like we talked about several scenes where I was just like, what does this have to do with anything? Even like with the earthworm scene, I'm like, I'm sure there's some rationale for this, or like the roach, but I was like, it's just like kind of weird and bizarre. Like she just wanted to get punished, I guess, and that's why she included those. But I don't know. I was just like a little like thrown off with some of the aspects or parts of this film. What else was I going to say? And I think the worst indication of like that I just, or not the worst indication. I think what was kind of problematic is at times I felt kind of bored watching this film, where I like got distracted, which was not like ideal, and like a lot of like that's not a good indication of like my feelings towards the film. So I would say overall I have to give this movie a 5.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, my score is just slightly higher. Like, I think my issues with the film was that I didn't mind the pace too much. I did think it was slow at times. I just like I felt myself getting distracted, and that usually I'm annoyed when people like I'm watching things with people and they're like distracted. And I usually don't if I'm gonna like commit to something. And this was, I was like glancing at my phone at times, and like I didn't think I missed much. Yeah, and I think it goes back to the randomness. I think like this film suffers from. I keep using the same analogy, but I think it's the most adept. Where like again, blank canvas. I have a general idea, but I'm gonna stick a lot of stuff in there, And so because I think you're right, the cohesion is off. It feels like it just, you know, it's like a tennis ball. You're like headed back and forth. You're like, what is going on here? Like, I think the initial premise gets you in, but then after that, it doesn't sustain it.
That mean we're gonna watch what's that tennis movie?
Which one?
Speaking of weird dynamics that just came out with Zendaya.
It's not high on my list. I have we still gotta get to the other two in this cycle that I got, and then I gotta think of my next cycle. But basically, yeah, my issue was I think that suffers from that. I think at times, I think the leads really carry this film. I'm okay with that. Sometimes I think this time I had issues just because like I think you could have done more even with this topic.
Sure, yeah.
So I actually think that the director and the screenplay writer left some on the table. It's cool to be bold, but you got to be bold and correct. So I give it some bonus points, but not like crazy amount. Because where I came in was 6.5, which is like,
yeah. We
but it's
talked
not
about some other films that we reviewed that were bold in terms of their subject matter, and I think did it right. And they got great scores from us. Where I would say Burning and Coherence.
Exactly. So like I didn't want to like, yeah, I was torn between that 6 and 6.5, and I think the actors carrying the film give me that extra half point because I think they did a great job, and I think they really like got me to believe that these characters could exist. I think that's important too. Something I didn't appreciate enough is that like sometimes when you're trying to do like these weird characters, you're like, is this realistic? Like nobody's like, yeah, I've seen weird people. I've come across it. I've never seen that. This one felt like to a degree where like I could see this. Like
I'm sure there are people like this for sure.
But yeah,
I mean, there's even people like Destiny.
But he's abnormal to a degree, but he doesn't do any of this stuff. Like this stuff was weird, dude.
No. I'm talking about some of the relationship dynamics he has.
I mean, but that's like normalized now. The whole like multiple thing, yeah, and like. Even before it was a term, there were plenty of guys that were just having like a lot of affairs. So like it's whatever. They're just trying to like, in my opinion, this is something that's coming.
Well, I mean, for untraditional, there's also like conventions that have furries.
Exactly. I'm just saying, I don't know if I'll ever see in real life somebody waiting 72 hours and peeing themselves in the desk.
No, I mean, that was almost extreme. Like, I was like, this is just unnecessary. And then, like, the whole food strike thing, I think, also annoyed me. Like, I was like, this is so over the top.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that food strike thing. It's like, yeah, that's what I mean. There's so many random things. You're like, wait, this movie is like more like a crazy painting than it is like
I think that's what they were going for, but it just wasn't my cup of tea.
But I think this is why this movie in many ways doesn't age well, because I think a movie that ages well that I've noticed, because we've done a lot of these now, is able to tell the story with the tools of its time, but in a story style that is kind of like cross-generational. It's why we haven't done the original Star Wars yet, but I imagine if we were to watch it, even though it's mainstream and whatever, we could probably watch it today and be like, you know what, I have issues with the film. Maybe it's too archetypical, but it makes sense. And I'm here watching it in the 2020s.
Well, let me give you another example of kind of like a period piece that we did. It was definitely like part of the 80s, and there's no doubt. But some of the characters and story points of it were pretty timeless. Was Do the Right Thing.
Yeah, exactly. Another good one. Yeah, exactly. Like it's poignant for the time, but I could still watch it and be like, you know what? I get it. This one, I feel like this is why nobody knows about this film. And I came across it by happen chance because I think most people are in your camp of like, okay, I get it. They want to rip the movie too much about the topic it was tackling, but come on, dude. Like this movie, I'm not rewatching this.
I was done with this film once they talked. Is she on a food strike? And then he comes in with this car. Like, this is too much.
Yeah, so I think it's fair. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. I think this episode really emphasizes like just different relationship dynamics. It's not always vanilla, and sometimes you can be bold, but you also could be messy, right? And so I think that we're just trying to capture that. So yeah, but that's it for this week. Please like and subscribe. Leave us any comments, any other interesting BDSM films. Maybe we'll. I don't think we'll get to those, but
We're done with the topic.
but feel free to add them to the list. And yeah, peace out.